Colonel Hall, thanks for joining me on the podcast. It's been a long time coming. This is the perfect time to talk, and I've been meaning to do it because I talk about maintenance a good bit and how it's the backbone of making everything happen. So having you on here today to talk about maybe some of the challenges the Ukraine's facing, how we make our jets fly, the amount of energy and time that goes into each and every one of those flights, really takes a lot of people and a big team effort, and it's going to be interesting to talk about that today. So thanks for joining me on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been great. I've been, as you know, following your show since you started. And it was great watching you do the demo back when we were at Shaw together. So, great to be on. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, I do have to thank you. I mean, I was very fortunate doing the demo because of the leadership at Shaw, I think, was so on board from you, Colonel Jackson being the ops group commander, obviously you having the maintenance side of the house, Colonel O'Malley, because demo is a resource drain. And I know while you were the maintenance group commander, I undoubtedly broke jets and left them stranded on the road, which was then taxing now AMXS, but I think now it's the Fighter Generation group.
Yeah, Fighter Generation, which we started
Fighter Generation group. Yeah, so a lot to talk about there, but was definitely putting a lot of tax on the maintainer, the maintenance group back at home to support that, make that mission happen. So it'd be good to chat about all those experiences here today.
You bet. Yeah, well, I think it's just an important mission, right? The work that the demo teams do, whether it be the Viper demo team, which for me is the favorite, obviously, because I ain't got the shirt, it's so important to what we do as an Air Force to have people understand what it is we do, right? You hear the loud noise, you see the cool shades, right, and get the cool swag. But getting the chance to talk to you or the other demo pilots, getting a chance to talk to the maintainers and the PA folks that are there, what are the things we do in the Air Force? What an amazing recruiting tool. And so it was never a doubt whether we would support that. But you're right, it is a drain because we try to give you the best people. And so it takes away from the other AMUs at the time, now the FGS tool, to do that. But I think it's worthwhile. And this is part of the big Air Force mission. You got to do it.
Yeah, I'm glad we do it because I think it is one of those pieces that there's so many people they'll never come in contact with someone that serves, or they won't have someone in the immediate family or even a friend that serves in the military. But a lot of people go to air shows or see flyovers. So there's that opportunity to reach out and touch people, so to speak, that normally would not be anywhere close to the Air Force, to the Navy, whatever it might be. But again, while demo is fun and I really enjoyed it, I realized and fully appreciated the amount of effort and energy it took for people to make that happen. So thanks to you and your team. I do appreciate it. Again, maintainers make the world go round. So I'm appreciative of that.
We try.
Well, I want to hit some of the highlights here of your bio. You're currently Deputy Commander of the Air Force Sustainment Center, which we got a lot to talk about with that, located out at Tinker Air Force Base, Oklahoma. You lead a team of 40,000 total force airmen across 3 logistics complexes, 2 air base wings, 2 supply chains, and globally at 26 locations. You're responsible for $26 billion in assets, generating $16 billion in annual revenue. You're originally from right up the road, I guess, from me up there in Atlanta, Georgia, Walton High School, where I went to Stars Mill High School. But you've served across the globe. We crossed paths when you were the maintenance group commander there at Shaw Air Force Base as you moved on to school. Kunsan, everyone's favorite spot in the world, and now out at Tinker, where you served as the 72nd Air Base Wing Commander, and now you're the Deputy Commander again at the Air Force Sustainment Center. So lot to dig in here today.
It has been awesome. I grew up in the Air Force. My dad was a F-4 backseater in Vietnam, went to pilot training, and so I was born at Laughlin Air Force Base. Lovely location that I don't remember. Would like to go back sometime just to check it out, see what it's like.
Would you though? I mean, you heard the stories.
I do want to go see it. Just, I love everything about the Air Force. White jets, big jets, small jets. Obviously, the Viper is my favorite. It should be everybody's favorite. But, so it's been great starting off at Nella. I think was a gift that I had coming out of the academy, and you got to see the whole of the fighter community at the time was there. All the jets were there, plus we had the helicopters up the road, so you just got good experiences. And I got some really good mentorship from my ops counterparts, because back then we were not together in ops and maintenance, but my division commander at the time was the major, then lieutenant colonel, then lieutenant general, Jason Franklin. And he basically said, hey, look, we're a team. We got to make this happen. I'm going to bring you in on all this stuff and teach you what it is that we know, and why it's important. And I said, okay. And, like I said, I grew up with a fighter pilot for a dad, so I speak fighter pilot and I speak maintenance. And so being able to blend those two worlds and explain to my crew, here's why they need what they need. And, on this one, we need to flex. But on this one, I can go back to the boss and go, hey, sir, I know you need this, but here's what's happening over here. And he did a great job of saying, okay, cool, we'll back it down a little bit so we can back it down now so we can push it up again later. But that was formative to me in the Air Force, making sure that I stepped 1 foot in maintenance and 1 foot in ops all the time, because, as a maintainer, our job is to produce airplane, right? It's not to have awesome metrics. Like, it's great if you do have awesome metrics, but if you're not producing airplanes, then we're not training our pilots, and our pilots aren't getting what they need to go down range. And I don't want to have to tell somebody, your son or daughter didn't come home because we weren't able to give them enough training stories. That's not something I want. And so that's the attitude I've kind of taken growing up through, Nellis, Spang, Masala, Kunsan, all the Viper bases. No, didn't make it to Cannon. That's okay.
Do you think that mentality is shared by a lot of your colleagues, or have you seen a different side?
I think when I was coming in, it wasn't quite like that. There was a lot of, I would say at Nellis, it wasn't that way. At Nellis, it was very much, we need to produce airplanes. And we talked about metrics, right? Because they can help you figure out problems and where to focus your energies and things to then further produce more sortie. But I have been to places where it's been all about, hey, we need to have, this MC rate, this break rate, this fix rate. And that was the focus and not the sorties. And I don't think we were as successful when we did that. And so I think it comes to your upbringing. And so the folks that I've been fortunate enough to be around have been, we need to understand both. I really loved General Jumper, when he said, I want, our pilots to have a PhD in flying, and I want our maintainers to have a PhD in maintenance. But you can't do either one if you don't understand each other and talk. So that's kind of how we worked it. And you got to kind of see that with Maestro and Hack and I, and kind of how we made decisions and when we ramped up and didn't ramp up, and where we were willing to take risk and not take risk. And, I thought we had an awesome team there. Shot was really magical.
Yeah, so that's kind of my, point is I saw it working really well. And while I was in the demo side, again, a little bit different, you could see that working. I saw it one other time when I was at Columbus, and it happened, contract maintenance had a swap out of the contract. Contractor A left, and they left with all the parts. Contractor B showed up on Monday and didn't know how to fix the planes, didn't know how to pull from the supply chain. And so it just crippled, went from generating probably 170 lines per day down to 20 or 30 lines per day. And everyone's saying, we got to take a knee to let maintenance get back on its feet. And so for those listening who have been around, what I have seen, and I know that's just what you've obviously seen, is sometimes there is a split between ops and maintenance, and everyone is focused on their metrics and what their bosses are concerned about. On the ops side, maybe it's knocking out all these upgrade sorties, knocking out all these missions, yada, yada, yada. On the maintenance side, is it the FMC rate? Is it the fly rate? Whatever it might be. But everyone's focused on the metrics and not necessarily what the mission is. Like, hey, what is the purpose of our existence? To go kick down the door and do the nation's business. And it gets lost in these competing interests until those teams can kind of blend and see all right, hey, you know what? This is really important for ops. We need to generate these 3 other aircraft that are sitting on the line because we can now. Or no, if we do that, this is why it's going to breaking the force 2 weeks down the road. So we need to be the priority here and take a knee. And finding that blend with the right mentality and right purpose, I guess that's probably fair. And you've talked to it more of me, for the Air Force in general, figuring out, what is the mission? What is the objective? Who's the supporting force? Who's the fighting force? And it can flex depending on what the environment is.
I 100% agree with you, and I lose the fact that you lose the supporting kind of illusion there, because you got to understand where you are, right? And one's not better than the other. You just have to understand what your purpose is, right? And if your purpose is to break things and kill people, right? Hit the pickle button, great. That doesn't mean as a maintainer I can't have the same mentality of hey, you got to be a warrior. You got to like how you say, you got to be an athlete. You got to make it happen. right? So I think the problem that I've seen it over the years is when the two are unable to communicate. And I've been at bases where we've had a great relationship and you can go back and forth, and I think that works the best. But I've been at places where it's been, we are going to fly, and we are going to fly, and we are going to fly. And you keep going, all right, sir, okay, I'm going to put those stories up there, and you keep breaking. Oh, by the way, you know that I'm at 60% manning for our avionics, and Viper might be an avionics heavy airplane. So
slightly,
if you keep doing this, we're going to get down to a hole, and I can't fix jets faster than we're breaking them. And that's when you see that, proverbial maintenance death route you hear about. I've been in one. I've seen it firsthand. We can talk about that at Masawa. It was terrible. And it was all because you had two leaders, I think, who were not communicating properly together and understanding the give and the take. And it was all take, and not any give on either side. And so right until we couldn't produce, I think there was a day we could not produce 3 soldiers in a day.
That's crazy.
So broken. It was great. Yeah. So you have to communicate. You have to be a team. But on the maintenance side, you have to be mission focused. You can't be metrics focused. And I'm not saying no to metrics. I don't want to hit everyone like, oh, Sebren's like, don't worry about metrics. Absolutely, you got to think about that. But because that's going to help you make decisions. But if that's your sole focus in life, dude, you're messing it up. You're messing it up. Mission.
Yeah, Jeff Bezos, actually, I heard him on a podcast, and he was talking about data-driven decisions, and data-driven decisions are great. But he was also talking about some of the anecdotal data, the soft data that comes in, and being able to read that and massage it, versus that is the piece that I think sometimes gets lost or creates frustration when the focus is solely on the PowerPoint slide, and if it's green, yellow, or red, and how do we turn this little block green? And like, if we're so focused on that, maybe it is really important, but also like in the big scheme of things, maybe that's not the intent, maybe that's not the objective, to have whatever arbitrary number that we came up with to be above 70%. You can kind of see I've seen that struggle for sure.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I like embracing the red, to be honest with you. Green is, interesting. Red is compelling to me. And I'll give you an example. So Masawa, so it might be important if you're a seed jet, if your raw works.
It's a nice feature.
You can tell me better, right?
Yeah.
So we were having real problems with the raw at the time, and they just wanted to write it up as PMC, and so it makes it yellow. And so I'm like, guys, we're a seed unit. I don't understand why we're PMC for this. And, we worked it out with the OG, and they want to keep flying. And I was like, well, you can fly it NMC-MM, which means non-mission capable for maintenance, but it's still a flyable jet, so you can get up and still do some stories.
Would be partially mission capable, right? For those.
That's right. Yeah. Sorry, I should probably explain that. Or we can, and so while we're waiting for those parts to come in, we can still use the jets for training. We wouldn't be able to use them for combat, but if I always code everything yellow, then the supply system may go, oh, that's interesting, but it's not a MICAP, so I'm not going to give you prior. And so we just weren't doing it the way we needed to do it to make sure the supply system saw it the way we did. And once we did that, parts started flowing in. And so then we started greening our jet level. And, for too long, we had a bunch of green jets being having RWR problems anymore. But that's where you can use metrics to help yourself versus just saying, oh, we're red, we can't fly, or oh, we're green, we're good, because you might not be. She might be masking something. So you have to understand what you're seeing. So you're right. If you're just looking red, yellow, green, and that's going to make your decisions, then you're not doing it right either.
I want to talk about the Sustainment Center, but I would like to back up, probably starting with your time as a maintenance group commander, and start building out the picture of what it takes to generate jets in the air. So as a maintenance group commander, and I know the Air Force has done a lot of changes, so we could talk about that as well. But what underneath you, what is the maintenance group comprised of at like your average fighter wing, as far as number of bodies and types of entities that are all there supporting the group?
Sure, you're going to have a few different squadrons. I'll probably blend them up a little bit. So your first squadron that you have entity is going to be what was your AMXS, and so then you would separate that into different the aircraft maintenance squadron. You just separate that into aircraft maintenance units, AMUs, and you would have one per fire squadron. So if you're at Kunsan, We got the 80th AMU and 35th AMU, and they're paired with those fighter squadrons. And their job is day-to-day touch maintenance on those aircraft. So removing and replacing components, servicing the aircraft, general launch and recover, some, I'll call it minor repairs, with reference to what your maintenance squadron is going to do. And so that's like your flight line guide that you interacted with on the flight line the most when you're a pilot. Then you're going to have, you could have a components maintenance squadron and an equipment maintenance squadron, and they each have their own kind of unique things that they're going to do. So if a component maintenance squadron is going to be your avionics folks, your engine folks, those kinds of things. And then your equipment maintenance folks are going to be your aircraft ground equipment. They're going to be your bomb racks, missile racks out of the armament systems. It's going to be your munition storage area, unless you also have a separate munition squadron. And then you're going to have kind of a staff function. And we used to have a squadron called the Logistics Support Squadron. That went away. This became part of the maintenance group staff. And so they're going to do a lot of analysis for you. It's going to be your quality assurance is going to be up there. The guys that go inspect the work to make sure everybody's doing what they need to do every single day. So that's kind of your vanilla, what it looks like. And then in 2020, you had left by this time at Shaw, we changed to what we call the Fighter Generation Squadron. So we disbanded the Aircraft Maintenance Squadron, which is this huge, almost 1,000-person squadron. And we basically turned the aircraft maintenance unit into squadron, self-sustaining squadrons that had a no-kidding G-Series orders commander. And so now you had a G-Series order commander working with another G-Series order commander in the ops group, and those two were solving problems together. And it was, I think, much better because you had understood better the supported relationship there. And then I got ops worried about ops stuff, and I got maintenance worried about maintenance stuff. And we would pick up and deploy. You can take those two and deploy them. But now, because of the leadership aspect that you have in that new Fighter Generation Squadron, now you can actually break it apart into multiple areas. So now I can send a big ship over here, a big ship over here, and I've got the maintenance leadership that can go along to make sure that they're doing what they need to do to support whatever the operations are there. So it was a huge kind of leadership fix, I think, that we were able to do there. Okay, now that squadron, if you're in a 900-person squadron, there's no chance that your people. You're going to know a few. And, you're doing Article 15s, you're doing, discipline stuff, you're doing, like I say, like the commander, you're doing all the bad things. And you never get to do any of the good stuff, right? Because you got to delegate that down.
I did have a buddy who was a maintenance officer, and so he is, I think, a 135 unit. But he said all he did in his office all day long was discipline. He would just hand out Article 15s, letters of reprimand. That's all he did, like all day long. You're like, well, that sounds like just a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's not, like you say, that's not where you want to be in life. Anyway, so if you can break that apart, and so now I've got a commander who's in charge of, say, 250 to 300 people. Now you can know most of the people in there, and most of the people know who you are. AMXF, Airman Smedley on the flight line had no idea who their squadron commander was. She could have been the best squadron commander in the world, but that airman would not know. So now the airmen know who the commander is, and so they also understand. They probably know my story, so when it comes to promotion time, it's better for that. When it comes to discipline, they know it's coming from someone who knows who they are and can relate what's going on. And then that commander can also get into the business of our job, which is producing sortie. As an AMXS commander, you probably have no idea what's actually happening in maintenance because you're tied up with all the other stuff. But now, in this smaller unit, you should know all the maintenance stuff that's happening. You should know all the personnel stuff that's happening. And I think that's what makes it better.
Yeah, so beforehand, if the way I'm understanding it, you used to have the AMXS, the Aircraft Maintenance Squadron, 1,000 people at Shaw, 3 fighter squadrons, so 3 squadrons worth of jets. But each squadron had the AMU, and the AMU was typically an 03 or an 04 captain or major who was running that AMU, correct?
If you were lucky, you had a captain. But
Okay.
A lot of our AMUs across the Air Force had lieutenants, just because of the way maintenance manning is for the last 10 or 15 years.
So I guess this created more officer roles. Obviously, it created 2 G series. And for those listening to it, it was like G series orders that allows the commander to hand down punishments and all sorts of stuff. So it obviously created those positions or the commander position in there. Did it create additional officer positions in there?
So what we did was we used the billets from the other DO position, and we used those major billets to create those squadron commanders. And then now you're a captain as a DO, and so you're much more likely to have a major squadron commander and a captain DO than you were to have a lieutenant colonel and a major. You might get a lieutenant colonel, and then you might get a captain. But as you bring it down just a little bit, and again, I don't say only 300 people, so a major and a captain maintainer ought to be able to run that no problem. And there's plenty of that level in the Air Force. What we had at the time was a really low level of lieutenant colonel, and so it made sense to use those majors. And then that's kind of a first squadron, because we're always going to do two. We're going to do a first squadron and a second squadron. So your smallest squadron is the FGS, and then your next squadron could be one of those back shop squadrons I told you about. They're going to be much larger, probably between 500 and 600 people.
Yeah, it has to feel like from our deployment to Jordan at the time, right? It was a fighter group. I forget I don't think we call it a fighter group, but it was a group. And then underneath that, the fighter squadron commander basically was the maintenance squadron commander as well. So, obviously everyone had buy-in because they could immediately see the impact of the mission, which I think is a little bit easier in those environments. It was easier in demo. The jet didn't go. You can clearly see that the mission didn't happen. And on the deployment, if the jets came back without bombs or it came back, again, there's an immediate feedback versus when you're standing on the flight line in Sumter, South Carolina, melting all day long. The jet leaves for 6 hours and then comes back. Like, it's tough to necessarily see the importance of the role, I think, there. But those small groups, or the smaller interconnected and woven together, much easier, I think, to get the buy-in and see the impact of the mission, I think.
And it was real important to us to have that what you're talking about, the buy-in there. And so when we were coming up with this concept, I wanted the 77th Fighter Generation Squadron to continue to be red, right? And to continue, double down.
Indeed.
To take, those two needed to be a cohesive unit that they were going to go into combat together. Because, beforehand, you kind of mentioned it, the flying squadron commander in that deployed location, a lot of people are like, oh, they're also in charge, they're also, maintenance reports to them. That's not actually how it worked. Like, it kind of looked that way, but all the maintenance decisions actually came back to somebody else to do that.
Which makes sense because he has no idea about maintenance.
Exactly. Hasn't grown up in that world. And that's not his or her fault. Just how they grew up. So I'm a fan of the two not being together because I've done that.
I can see that being an incredible challenge as well, especially if they don't see if they don't have that cohesive buy-in to what the mission is. And I gave that example, right? Again, I know Blitz wasn't making the maintenance calls, but they're working hand in hand, and he's just like demo, right? When I'm dealing with, Sergeant Snyder and Sergeant Hall now, Captain Hall at the time or now, but they let me know, and that's I have no idea. I have to go off what you say, and we'll make smart decisions. Like, we can cancel this practice because it's time to focus on fixing these jets, or vice versa. But I don't know. They let me turn a wrench once, like pulling the motor out, and then
that's a fun job.
And then kindly told me to go away. There's one weekend with all three motors pulled from the jets down there at demo, so it was always impressive to watch those guys work.
Yeah, that happens sometimes, but I'm a big fan of having our operators come out to the flight line. It does a couple things. Number one, those young airmen just think the world of you. And they just are like, oh my gosh, they're talking to me. You may not see yourself that way, but they sure do. And so what I found most successful, kind of watching that over the years, is the pilots that come out and spend, 2 or 3 minutes. Here's my kneeboard. Like, here's the map. Here's what we're going to go do. This is why it's important. We're going to go drop bombs here. Even if it's a training mission, this is what we're going to do. We're going to go do BFM. This is what it looks like. And then come back and go, hey, it was great or not great. And then, okay, it had this problem with the jet. It makes a world of difference, and the airmen will just eat that up, and they work so hard because then it tells them, okay, what I did or didn't do made a difference up there. And so when you come back and go, hey, good jet, thanks. Great. But if you come back and go, hey, remember that torpedo I was talking to you about? I got killed because this thing didn't work. And they go, okay, that's real to them now because, that's not what they understand. So we need to teach them more about that. And then I think also, the pilot side, you get to see a little bit more about what it takes. And so then when you grow up a little bit, you can understand that give and flow. And so when the maintainer's going, I can't do it right now. I got a jet in phase. I got another one coming in. I can't get this one out. I got these down for parts. Like, I just need a break right now. But in about 2 weeks, I'll be ready to go and we can push it up again. Okay. And I think it's just so helpful to do that.
Yeah, I wish I had done it sooner. There were definitely times where I would, sit there with the crew chief as there's a delay, and we would talk about, yep, I'm going out to this airspace, and this is what we're doing. And I think that's good. And conversely, seeing what it takes to, like, how long does it take to service the hydraulics or do the oil change, like knowing that. My demo example of the horizontal stab, which I do have it there. I had no idea that they epoxied all the fasteners. So it's like Phillips head screws. I don't know. There might be 200 fasteners that went in that thing. And watching guys with razor blades carve out the Phillips head screws so they could be unscrewed and fastened from the jet, you're just like, and it all was a piece that had delaminated, maybe a 6-inch piece that had delaminated and was starting to dig into the side of the fuselage, but that part's got to come off. That was mind-boggling, something that would be, in theory, that simple, but how many man-hours it takes to change something like that.
You should say that on a Thunderbird. I mentioned I started off at Nellis. My first job was on the armament flight, and so our job was all the bomb racks, missile racks, and the gun, and to include the Thunderbird jets. And they've got, that thick paint, so when you look at the jet, it looks smooth, and you can't see any of the screws. So I can't tell you the number of hours I sat there with some of my airmen with a scribe, like, I think there's a screw here. Let's dig out the paint. And like, nope, it's over here a little bit, just enough so that you can get a catch. And then, okay, I got the one screw. And then the next one, oh my gosh. But I learned a lot from my airmen by doing that, just sitting out there listening to them talk about the things that they need. It was awesome.
That's wild. All right, this is the part where there's probably some ambiguity. But if Wild Hair, to generate one F-16, that's, it's functioning, routine maintenance, that type stuff. How many people are touching that jet? How much time is it taking to prep it once it goes and flies for an hour and a half? On the back end, how much time is being put in to turn it to fly again another day?
We'll start with the Code 1 jet, right? The jet, you flew, you came back, no issues. Jet's good, you just need gas. So if you just need gas, you're going to need a couple crew chiefs. Because you got to have 2 people kind of looking around the whole jet. You're going to need a fuels person to come out to bring out the gas. So you're talking, 3 people. And if it's BFM sorter, you're not doing anything else with it. So it's pretty easy. So 3 guys takes them, 30 minutes. That's actually not too bad. Now, if you're talking about a Code 1 jet on a sortie when you went out and dropped bombs and you need bombs or bullets for the next one, you got those 3 folks. Then you got a 3-person weapons load crew team that's going to come out, and they're going to, put your new weapons up there. Plus again your fuels person, and so that's 6 just on the flight line. But then you got to back that up because you had to build a bomb, and there's a whole 300-person unit back there. That's all they do all day is build up bombs and chaff and flare. So now you're talking tens of people to put that jet up in the air to get it going. And then, of course, if you break one, probably it's going to break for some sort of avionics thing first. You're going to get some other stuff, but it's a lot of avionics on that aircraft. So you're going to need a couple of avionics people. All right, so you got those guys working while you got the crew chief doing their thing, while you got the fuels guy coming in. You're going to have to make him wait or go to another jet because you can't be doing fuels and that kind of thing at the same time. You got your expediter running around doing little expediter circles in there in the truck, moving the right person to the right jet for the right expertise. And then you got the pro super going, okay, I'm going to knock it off on this jet. It's just not going to make it for the next go. So go take all that energy that you did. And oh, by the way, you still didn't fix the jet, but I need you to move and go get this jet ready to go, for the go instead. So, it can be pretty difficult on some days, but on some days it could be real easy. So anywhere from, 3 or 4 people to, 15 or 20 to, for a couple of hours to get a jet going. But the Viper's pretty good as far as jets go. It's probably, knock wood, that's kind of the easiest jet to get up in the air. And it was that way by design.
Flying the demo config, clean config, I would buy that. Obviously, we got a small maintenance footprint, and you don't need a whole lot. You need gas, make sure all the fluids basically are topped off, and you can go rip around in that thing. But when you start, always the avionics, every single time, like that was going to be the targeting pod, the HTS pod, something with the helmet, weird or wacky that wasn't working right, that really could require some significant troubleshooting. Maybe it's easy. I know the turn it off, turn it back on. That's the thing, like, hey, I've already turned off the targeting pod. I've turned it back on. I've done the bit here. Like, what do you want to do? It's not the turn it off, turn it back on now, but that can get pretty complex. And
absolutely, if you get a radar problem, now you're even digging in deeper, because there's not a lot of people that are good at that. So, you're going to support, you're checking out all the test equipment, you're putting out the cones, you got to clear all the stuff away from in front of it. If you're going to radiate, or you got to tow it somewhere else to go radiate to fix that problem. That's not a jet that's going to make it the next go. It might not even make it the next day if you can't duplicate it on the ground. Those are the worst. The CNDs, those are the ones that just made my heart, sink. Like, what do you mean we can't duplicate that problem? If you can't duplicate it, I don't know that I fixed it.
Right.
And so those were the toughest, and the ones that, at least for me, it was, no, go back and let's go look at that again. One more time. Hey, let's put the jet up on jacks, swing the gear up, and then see if we can recreate it. If the jet maybe it thinks it's flying, if you can get the avionics doing just right. And so there's a lot of extra troubleshooting, and that's one of the areas right now that our maintainers struggle with, because of our skill level. Right. So when I came in 1996, the average staff sergeant was about 9 years. Right. Nowadays, the average staff sergeant is like 4.5 to 5 years. That's a different level of experience. And we had a lot of them. Right. My first AMU at Nellis was a 24 PAA. Right. We had 26 actual F-16s on the ramp, sport and weapons school. I had 230-ish people. And we were killing it. And you could walk any kind of day, you could walk into the day room and their feet were just sitting around studying CDCs, looking at magazines, whatever they were doing. Nowadays, if you go out to the AMU, 24 PA AMU, you got like 190, right? And so do we have a little bit too many in the 90s? Probably. Do we have too few now? Absolutely we do. And the Air Force has been singing it for years that we need more maintainers, and you get incrementally better year over year, but that skill level hurts, especially when now you also start swapping people. So you're a Viper guy for this assignment. Now you're an Eagle guy. Oh, nope, I'm going to send you over here. You're going to go work on A-10. Then we're going to bring you back to the Viper. You just lose some stuff.
That seems really difficult to do. I still talk to the guys who are on the team with me, and they send me some funny memes on occasion of, I guess, some of the challenges they face now that they're now part of the maintenance leadership as senior enlisted guys. And to me, I'm thinking this was probably, as before I went to demos, probably 2017 timeframe. And I feel like it was a result of the C-130 schoolhouse being closed down, the H model schoolhouse. And there was a whole inject of crew chiefs and other maintenance that showed up at Shaw. And I like career progression, like, hey, I guess maintenance code. So, one of these is not like the others, but hey, you're gonna go here and figure it out. And I was taxiing in. I think this crew chief, she had never seen an F-16 by the deer in the headlights, and then she had to get someone else to come taxi me in. But not knocking her, right? Like, this is like brand new, figuring out, but getting all those people up to speed. And while, hey, on paper you got the manning, but you don't have the qualified manning to go out there and do the mission. It's still taxing on the ones who know how to do it, and takes years to get them up to speed. That's not something. Right. Yeah. Hey, you're an aircraft F-16 maintainer.
Takes 5 years to get 5 years of experience, right? I mean,
yeah. This is the
that's a great example.
Force faces.
It's interesting that you saw that, because at that time I was the group commander at Kunsan, so I was Phoenix out there, and we had a jet go off the runway, or almost off the runway. Main landing gear blew out, and then it started dragging on the runway, and kicked back, broke the drag brace, came back and hit the 341 bulkhead back there, which is kind of the main thing to hold the jet back together back there. And I don't know how he kept it on the runway, but God bless him, he did. and he was able to get out and no injuries. And so as we did the 411, what happened on this thing, we dug back in like, okay, it had a brake change before that. All right, okay, who did the brakes? Because what he did was he hit the brakes, no worky. Flip to what channel you go, channel 1, channel 2, right? Yeah. And then instead of ABS, they went and locked them up. And so that's what caused the problems. Like, okay, let's go figure out what happened there. Well, it turns out we had some folks who had come off the C-130 to come over to Kunsan and do some work. And the way that you change brakes on a C-130 is similar, but not the same to the F-16. And so the F-16 has, this many lines, do these things, and so does the C-130. And the C-130 stops here. But on the Viper, it has do this, this, and this. Well, they're like, oh, we made it here. We're good to go. Now, the other thing that was a problem, they didn't do a proper ops check. So that's where the actual failure comes in. But really what ended up happening is that the airplane thought it was only going 5-10 miles an hour, so it didn't need to use anti-skid. And so, it's going, however fast you land, 180 knots or whatever it is you guys got. And so 180 knots is a fast difference. And so you lock the brake, it blew everything right away. So that was a skill transference problem, right? That is probably in whatever. I can imagine it's probably if you go from one aircraft to another, you got to worry about some of that, skill transfer. Same thing in maintenance.
Yeah, the negative transfer for sure. And that's absolutely caused mishaps on the ops side of the house, doing negative transfer, reverting back to the previous procedure from the other plane or whatever it might be. How is it, so today, any healthier or better? I mean, you mentioned obviously the staff sergeant piece going from a 9.5 year average to a 4.5 year average or so. But I mean, has it gotten better?
I think it has gotten better over the last few years because you've had a real big focus on it. And at least at Shaw, so I'll talk to Shaw specifically, I guess. Shaw was kind of the feeder for everybody else because it was the only operational F-16 wing in the active duty. All the other operational active duty wings are overseas. It didn't used to be that way. It used to have Cannon out there. It used to have several others, but Charles the only one. And you can't send somebody overseas to overseas if they don't want to. And so you have to come to Shaw. So we get all the newbies, come to Shaw. We get them trained up, and then you can send them to Kunsan because Kunsan's typically not going to take somebody right out of tech school. Although they will probably get there one day if we had kept going down where we were. Everybody's going to come to Shaw, and then they're going to get farmed out to Misawa, Kunsan, Osan, right, Spangdalam, and then we're going to get a fresh batch in. So we couldn't ever keep people, and so that was a major problem. And so they fixed some of that now to keep people at Shaw and other places longer to get that experience. So when you show up to your next base, you're even better. And then I don't know specifically what each career field is doing to keep you on a particular airframe for longer. But over time, as we shrink down how many F-16 units there are and expand F-35 units, you're going to see the skill transference out from one to the other. So we'll have to manage that. There's a lot of training programs that we can do. Field training detachments do a lot of good work, making sure you can get trained up pretty well. But again, it goes back to the experience, right? You need some time to work different sets and reps. And I think the 82nd Training Wing at Shepherd is kind of maintenance university. And they're doing a lot with DR. So we can get airmen come in and they can see and practice repair like 100 times before going out and actually doing it. And so that's helping a lot. You can never get away, just like you talk about with FIM. They can do a lot for you, but eventually you got to get in the airplane. It's the same with maintenance. But if I can get you some really good skills and see and think about a lot of different things before putting you on the actual, I can make that transfer faster. And so that's what they're doing a lot of these days.
I've seen some blips about that. And ironically, I went to Oak Ridge, the Y-12 complex, and one of their nuclear training facilities using augmented reality, which I'd never seen. But their big thing is like hot or glove boxes, which apparently are a real pain to train with. And then doing the real thing can be really dangerous. So it's crazy using these gloves, like the textile feedback, and then with the goggles, like how, I mean, I felt like I was picking up nuclear material and pouring it over stuff or whatever it might be. So yeah, leveraging technology to do training. I'm curious, it does seem like guys will move from airframe to airframe fairly frequently in their career. And maybe that's just been my exposure and that's not necessarily the truth, but it seems like staying more or less in the F-16 pipeline or the Raptor pipeline with, branching out maybe here or there, but you're an F-16 subject matter expert, especially dealing with like avionics. Like if you're an F-35 avionics specialist going to an A-10 unit, like, or vice versa, I can't see a huge value add, but maybe, again, I don't know about it. Like, I guess why so much movement? Why not just keep guys kind of in that pipeline?
Well, so to answer that question, you got to go back to about 2003 or so when we had a big drawdown, particularly in our maintenance world. And you couldn't. The F-16 guys were always going to Kunsan, right? Always going to Osan, right? The Eagle guys were going to like Keflavik, for 3 months, 4 months, whatever. And so there was a little bit of that talk going on, but the real point of that was at some point it became, we're not retaining people because you're going to do an assignment, you're going to go to Kunsan. You're going to do an assignment, you're going to go to Kunsan because you stayed on the F-16, right? And you're going to be, if you're a Viper guy, you're going to be stationed at Cannon, and you're going to go to Kunsan. And then at the time, you could still go to Mountain Home, right? Then you're going to go back to Kunsan. And then, you're going to go, what? People just were like, okay, fine. I'll get out. And then the Air Force decided to change what's called the shred out. So if you're a crew chief, so you're a 2A6, whatever, at the 5 level, after you got your 5 level, you're now basically a maintainer. You're not a F-16 maintainer anymore. It used to be you were a 2A6, XX, and then you were like I don't remember what it was. Let's call it J. That meant you were going to be on F-16s. You're only ever going to be assigned to an F-16 unit. Around that 2003 time frame, we said we can't do that anymore because we don't have enough retention. We need people fooling around to different bases. And so they said, now you're just going to be a general tactical aircraft. So you're going to be a fighter for all intents and purposes, crew chief. So now you're going to move around. That was back in 2003. And we haven't been able to go back because we just don't have enough people to keep them in that world. And it doesn't help when you don't know how many how many squadrons you're going to have every year based on what we are and aren't allowed to to divest or increase. And so you have to be able to move people around. And even if we did that, you weren't going to guarantee everyone was going to stay because life happens, right? We have EFMP condition happens in your family. I can't go to base X anymore. I can only go to these and only has this airframe. So there's always going to be some of that. But we just exploded that back in 2003 and just basically said, you're a fighter crew chief, have at it. And it has caused problems. I remember being on the flight line out of Balad, right? The Mortar Reederville out there. And it is taking forever for these guys to change an engine. And I'm just almost apoplectic over here. Like, I can't understand why it's taking this long to change an engine. It's the only thing we do is work and eat and go to the gym. Like, what else can we do? So I finally roll out there and a couple guys out there, they're working real hard. And I just pop in. I say, hey guys, how's it going? Like, what help you need? Who can I call to get out here to help you? Whatever. And they're like, oh, we think we got it. We're not really sure. I said, where are you from? And I don't remember what base they were at the time. And I said, okay, what were you doing before that? Oh, I was an F-15 crew chief. I'm like, oh, how long have you been an F-15 crew chief? Well, I got to the unit about, a couple months before we deployed. You've been a Viper crew chief for a couple of months, and you're out here trying to change an engine by yourself? Like that's not a good plan, right? So it hurts us, and we have to manage that better.
I can see that. I mean, it's a double-edged sword. On the one hand, if you're a Viper guy and you're looking at the triangle of doom between Kunsan, Shaw, and Holloman, or whatever it might have been, Cannon back in the day, at some point you're not going to stay in because you're tired of it. So I can see that. It's just, it's curious as far as how do you retain the right talent in the Air Force, in the weapons system, so that you can maintain these. Because obviously going to the Viper, for instance, obviously very heavily avionics intensive, and everything after the Viper even more so. But without having that expertise, having that 7 level who's got, knows all the ins and outs and has seen this before and knows that this is going to be an engine pull to change this little one wire that's chafing or whatever it might be. That's an irreplaceable person, in my opinion. And again, it takes 12 years, 10 years to build someone to that point.
Yeah, 100% agree. And I think we've done better over the years with our aircraft design. LO aside, I don't want to talk about LO because it's just a pan on the keister, but the jet itself, they have designed them for maintainability much better. And so, minus the engine change on F-35, which I think takes entirely too long, it's much less maintenance intensive now than it was. And things aren't blocked. Like if you try to get into a Viper, if you've been in, you've seen the panels opened up and you're trying to get into something and, the hole's like barely big enough for your arm to go in there. And it's not this first component, it's the component behind it. So I actually have to take this one out first. That drives a whole bunch of ops checks to get to this one thing that probably didn't require a bunch of ops checks. And so it's a lot of extra work, but I think we've done it better with our design for the newer aircraft, but as long as we keep these legacy, we are going to need people that have been on those airplanes for a while to get after what you're talking about. What's the fastest way to fix this jet?
Yeah, I want to obviously talk a little bit about Ukraine, probably some of the challenges they have there, and to lead in. Old Stephen Mullins, he's out there leading the charge there. Stephen was avionics tech on the Viper demo team forever. And I remember one day I was sitting in my office, my back's to the window, right? I forget what drove this change, but it was changing the throttle. So, and he was hanging upside down over the rail for hours. Because all the wires in the pinch, like, who came up with this design? I figured this thing would be a plug and play, but it's 70 little wires underneath there and soldering and putting them in the right spots. I was like, and leaning over on the over the rail on whatever the stand. You're just like, that's not easy. And he's a very experienced guy. So if you run into that problem in an austere environment with someone who doesn't have that expertise, you're like, good luck.
That's why it's super important that when you build up your teams, those fire generation squadrons out there, that you pick the right people on the right skill level and you practice every day so that when you're downrange, you know that you can fix those things. Because if you don't take it downrange, you don't have it. And it's hard to call back and walk somebody through a 70-pin change, on a cannon plug.
Good luck.
Yeah, no, not happening.
We're all counting on you. So pivoting to Ukraine, I've talked about it on the podcast. I put some stuff out there. I always said with this, and I think people will agree now, especially like this is not going to be the thing that changes the war. I think it is a nicety given them, but my thing has always been there is a big challenge, I think, on the ops side of training pilots to go from a Soviet era designed aircraft and the ergonomics and how that works, plop them into a Western fighter with different thought processes on how the plane is employed, the tactics, et cetera. Not saying it's impossible. But the real challenge, in my opinion, is the maintenance and the logistics side of the house in supporting these. So, you get them there, you can fly them a little bit, but the minute they start breaking, how do you fix these things? How do you support them with the supply chain? Because even the United States Air Force, being in the United States with Lockheed Martin, you still run into supply and all the vendors in the United States, for the most part, you run into supply chain issues and getting the parts and pieces that you need to repair these jets. So I'm curious to get your take on, if you're country X, and again, for instance, Ukraine, a country who gets a new fighter aircraft that has already been around for a while and basically being donated to you. How are you going about setting up the maintenance and logistics piece? What are the hurdles you're thinking about? What are they facing, et cetera? So I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, the first thing I'm thinking about is training. I'm not even thinking about the supply chain when you first get them. I'm thinking about how do you train. And launch and recovery is going to be pretty easy. Like, I know how to launch and recover an aircraft, but officer can do it. Anybody can do it. But putting gas on is pretty easy. So those easy things we talked about earlier, if it's just the jet that went up and it flew, and you bring it back, that's easy. But when it starts breaking, if you don't have the correct training, right, coupled with the correct technical orders or TOs, you've basically got a brick sitting there on the ramp that you can't fix. And so they are going to have, and I know they have them doing some training at various locations around. You just got to get experience. You're going to have to see, okay, here's a break. Okay, we're going to have to take some time to fix this. And I can't imagine trying to do this while you're in active combat.
Right. That's
I'm going to pick up a unit.
Yeah, we didn't even talk about that aspect. But you're in a contested environment.
Yeah, so you're going to take a brand new airplane that you've got very little training on. I don't know how many hours they're flying at, wherever they're doing their pilot training. And you're going to have a brand new maintenance crew. And so hopefully they've had some relationship before. So maybe they were flying, MiG-29, so you had the same maintainers and same pilots. So at least there's that relationship going. So if you don't have that, you're going to have to build that trust up. You damn well better have some good NCOs. Good NCO leadership that can be out there and be very hands-on with watching the repairs, understanding how to inspect a repair, because you may not have enough people to go around. So you're going to have a bunch of young folks, and let's say young, not age, but young on the airframe, and you got 5 or 6 airplanes that are broken. Well, who's the person or persons that's going around from jet to jet, watching and stepping in at the right time, going, okay, that's good, keep going till you get to here, then call me. This is good, versus like, well, we're experienced crew chiefs or we're experienced avionics, we're just going to fix it. Because you're probably not, particularly if we don't have the right TOs. And after that, then we can start talking about supply chain. We can start talking about depot maintenance. We can talk about aircraft battle damage repair if one takes shrapnel, either on the ground or in the air. How do you fix that? Because that's a whole different skill set in and of itself that requires special tooling and very special knowledge that even we struggle with in the Air Force. So we have some very specialized teams that do that at each of our depot locations. So you've got all of that to worry about, all while you're right in the combat every day. So that challenge for them is massive.
I was even thinking too, while they're maintainers, I'm sure, are well versed in the MiG-29, and if you have that kind of background and you're mechanically inclined, like figuring out how to work on another aircraft, not an impossible thing. Obviously, it takes time. The technical orders, the TOPs, going to be the instructions on how to do it. I wonder how well a lot of these guys speak English, but that's like the other thing too. So you're in a contested environment. Well, here's the instructions, but have we translated the TOs to Ukrainian?
I'll tell you one thing. I have a chance. We have at Shaw is partnered with is Israel, and some of their Viper units, and so we have an exchange that happens every now and again. And I was fortunate enough to go over there and see how they do it. And they have a conscription workforce, and so they have to train them up real quick. And so, okay, got it. But their TOs are amazing, because if you get to a spot in a TO where you're like, I just don't know, you can hit the hyperlink and up pops the video, and you can watch the video and go, oh, okay, I get that. And then you can go do it on the airplane. So I don't know if they have that over in Ukraine, but if they don't, that would be something I'd be looking for.
I assume Israel produced that?
Israel did, yeah.
Yeah. It is interesting now. I'm in a different world on the civilian side, and the equivalent of our TOs. I've learned in recent times that we pay and create different versions of them compared to other people who are flying the exact same plane and have been flying it for 30 years. And you're like, why are we doing this different? That's down a rabbit hole. Like, let's not reinvent the wheel. But that would be interesting. And in today's world, like, that would absolutely make sense and probably be super handy in such a situation.
Again, for sure.
The YouTube.
And it comes down to data rights. And so I can tell you, it is the way it is, agree or not agree. But as we field weapon systems and we, okay, it's going to cost this much. And then later we go, oh, no, it's not. It's going to cost this much. We got to shave the money from somewhere. Usually one of the first things we shave it off is the data rights to the TO. So we might get the paper copies of the TO that said how to do one, but we won't get the engineering behind it. And so then we're not able to produce the videos. We're not able to really get into, all right, is there a different way to repair this? Based on whatever the engineering schematics are for this structural component, we need, this kind of doubler. I need this, this kind of shape, to fix this. And so we don't necessarily buy that data. And it's been a problem over the years. And as our jets get older, it's the first thing that we start spending money on. And so we could have spent, $5 on it when we bought the airplane, but we didn't want to. But now we're going to spend $1,000 on it later when we're already having trouble with money sustaining an aircraft. So something that we need to do way earlier on our airplanes is buy those tech data rights so that we can change them over time and more easily maintain the jet weather. And then whichever country buys the jet, so you go to the FMS, you may have a different version of the aircraft, like the Viper. Viper's not a Viper. So this country has these capabilities, and this country has these capabilities. So you get these DOs, and you get these DOs. And like I said, they could be different. So you got to get the right ones for the right airplane. So Block 50 TO is not going to do you much good for a Block 25.
Yeah, that's the other one I mentioned early on, because I am still not entirely sure what jets Ukraine got and who they got them from. My understanding is that the Europeans all have since done the MLU,
and life upgrade.
I'm trying. What midlife upgrade, is that what it is?
Midlife upgrade. Yep.
But there's still some differences, I think, between the variations there. So again, like if you're going from a Block 50 to a Block 30 or a Block 40, there's differences. And while it's, I don't think it's too drastic, because we've spent time and money to match them up. They still exist. / you got to know what you're flying on that day, and the difference of especially when it comes to the avionics. I mean, that's usually where, again, all the bread and butter when you're out there doing it. Obviously, there are some engine differences. I think all their engines are going to be the same. I might be mistaken on that.
I hope so, because that's going to create another problem for you. If you have a 42 and 40, right, two different motors. So you got to have the test equipment to run both motors. You got to have a back shop capable of working on both motors, because they're conceptually designed differently and they are maintained differently. One's more of a horizontal, the other one you stand it up on its end to do it. So if it's not the same, you just created more layers of complexity. Can't even speak right now.
Yeah.
For what your maintenance infrastructure needs to look like, which ends up costing more money if you don't have the same. And then also costs you time, because now you have to have training. I got to have you trained. Are you trained on a Block 40 motor, or are you trained on a Block 50? Can you work on both? And that just takes time to do. And they haven't had a lot of time.
No, and obviously only see in the open source there a couple of the highlights. I think there's rumors / unconfirmed reports that they've shot down 2 Su-34s with the F-16. They've used F-16 to shoot down some cruise missiles. And done some various attacks. All that's kind of interesting to me. We'll not go too far down the rabbit hole with that, but not really. I guess not really hearing much as far as how it's going, which I also think that's part of this too, right? You have to have the F-16 be a successful story, in my opinion, going to Ukraine. But I undoubtedly believe those guys and gals are probably facing a lot of challenges when it comes to employing those and keeping those things flying. Maybe not, hope I'm wrong, but there's a lot of moving parts with it.
No doubt they've got the challenges. So time will tell how well they're meeting those challenges.
When it comes to battle damage, this is probably a little bit more towards the transition, like the Air Force Sustainment side of the house. But talk to me about the complexities of that and what it takes to be a maintainer who's qualified to handle that, assess that, get it flying again. What if I come back and I got a wing shot up? What does that look like?
Well, I mean, that's a bad day for you, but you brought it back, so that's good. I can remember, I'll tell a little story here. I was in Operation Allied Force as a lieutenant with the 81st Fighter Squadron out of Spangdahlem. The only time not on F-16, so I was on A-10. It was great squadron, great unit. And we took a couple of FAM in the engine. So I had one left side, one right side, I think, 2 different airplanes. And they come back and the engine's all shot up and the cowling's basically gone. And so we called in a team. At the time, we had these units called Combat Logistics Support Squadrons. They were basically a very specialized squadron. I think we had 3 of them, 1 each at Hill, Tinker, and Robin. Their sole focus was, how do I take really broken, crashed jet, put them back together again to get them flying again, right? And so they went to the Boneyard. They got an engine to sell. I'm not sure where they got the additional engine from, probably WRE somewhere, which is a war rating for engine. Brought their equipment out there, took all the battle damaged pieces off the aircraft to include the skin around the nacelle, reinstalled everything, put the engine back on, test run it, and we were off again. And not very long. Like the whole war was 78 days. Yeah. So it flew pretty quickly. I was very impressed with what they did. The Air Force has since disbanded those. That's part of that maintenance drawdown. So we took those squadrons and we condensed them down to a flight. Now we call Expeditionary Depot Maintenance Flight within each of those air logistic complexes, Hill, Tinker, and Robin. And they each have specialties. So as you might imagine, the Hill one is focused on fighters. The Tinker one's focused on their aircraft, mostly the bombers and tankers. And then you got one at Robin's focused on the airlifters. And so it's really neat. I got the chance to be the deputy commander for the air logistics complex at Hill. So I asked them one day, hey, can you take me out, show me all the stuff that you do? I've seen you do it live, but how do you train for this? And so how they get their people in, you got to be at least a 5 level, if not a 7 level when you get there. And then it still takes a year before you're ready to go do what you need to do. Because they're doing some pretty complex engineering. They do some work back and forth, usually virtually with an engineer to get the no kidding, math behind that. But they're going to design the repair themselves. They'll submit that, and engineers are going to go, yep, nope, move this here, move that there, and then they'll do that repair. And so, part of this tour was, hey, sir, here's the fireman's axe. Go put a hole in this. It was actually the F-22 at the time, so it's pretty cool to take an axe to an F-22 that's never going to fly again, obviously. And you hit that thing as hard as you can, put a big hole in it, and then you go, all right, how do you make a repair? Right. So first you clean it up, and then you create the panel that's going to go on there. You make that happen, you put the jet back up. Now, is it going to have the same LO capabilities? No. Is it going to fly again? Yeah. Could it employ weapons? Yeah. And so that's what they do, and that's all they train on every day. And then when you have a jet at a base and it has some pretty big damage, maybe you drug a wing, maybe something fell on it, you call the team out and they'll go do those repairs. At the same time, maybe do a little bit of training with those local units, just so they can see what it is. So if they saw it somewhere else, they would know, I can do this, or here's who I call. But it's a solid year before they're qualified to go out and do one of those repairs. And they work real closely with each of the program officers and their engineering to come up with the actual, no kidding, approved design of that repair. It's pretty awesome, the capabilities that they have. We have a very limited capacity. We have amazing capability.
Seemed like C-17, they landed gear up, I think, at Kandahar.
Yep.
That was probably well over a decade ago. A team like that would go to the field to get that one flying again, right?
Yeah, they would. Now, something like that, they're probably going to look at it. They're probably going to get a repair so they could do a one-time flight back to the depot, because that's probably going to be way more expensive than they could do to put it back into the fight. But they should be able to repair it enough to get it a one-time flight.
All the way back. Interesting. So day in and day out of the Sustainment Center, can you talk to me what the role is there, how it fits in the big picture when it comes to the maintenance side of the house and keeping these jets flying?
Sure. Yeah. Huge organizations. You read it off earlier. It's about 40,000 people. Most people are familiar with the depots that we've talked about a couple of times now. Hill, Tinker, and Robin, those air logistics complex, and they're the 1-star in charge of each of those. And then the 3 air base wings at those locations, and then the 2 supply chain wings in the Air Force are in the Sustainment Center. So the 448 supply chain wing, it does most of the work that's going to get you your component for all of the aircraft in depot, and they're going to also get you your components for the part that will eventually make it out to the field.
Does the Boneyard fall underneath that?
The Boneyard falls under Ogden Air Logistics Complex as a separate group, and so we can talk about the Boneyard too. Amazing capability down there as well. I think most people don't fully appreciate what they do down there, so I'll touch on that in a minute if you want to.
Yeah.
And so the 635th Supply Chain Operations Wing is actually based out of Scott Air Force Base, and its job is to move all the pieces and parts, right, and source all of the MICAP and all the pieces and parts going out to the various bases across the Air Force. So when you're at Base X and you call, big supply, you're calling the 635th Supply Chain Wing to help get you your parts. They also, little known to most people, they are also in charge of pretty much all of the war reserve materiel for the Air Force. And so they have a huge compound at Holloman that has all of the base expeditionary repair things, like all the shelters that you have out there, a lot of the equipment that you're going to need in wartime. They maintain that stock, and then they move it where it needs to go when it needs to go there. So it's a pretty huge operation. And then not a separate unit yet, but in the future, a couple of years, it will be a separate unit, is the software directorate. It'll end up being a wing or a complex or something later. But that is all of about 5,000 software professionals that are doing all of your operational flight programs. They're doing a lot with our weapons, making them, smarter, making them more efficient. They are doing a lot of stuff with space. They're doing any myriad of things, a lot of things kind of at that ZAP level too, that won't be able to talk about here, but they're heavily involved with what we do. Because as you know, all of our aircraft coming up now, a lot of beeps and squeaks in there, and so those are the guys and gals that know how to do the ones and zeros, and they are amazing. If you see some of the stuff they do and how fast they can make it happen, that's the kind of big picture Air Force Sustainment Center. And it's run by Lieutenant General Stacy Hawkins is our commander. I get a chance to be his deputy, and then we have a civilian executive director, Ms. Timifichik. She's a tier 2 SDF, and then 40,000 of our closest friends making it happen every day.
It's a small operation, no big deal.
Yeah,
just making all this happen. When it comes to the depot side of the house, I'm curious, honestly, with the F-16. This is probably, I know you're a little removed from the F-16 maybe a little bit, but the last I heard, the next big upgrade to M8, I think, was going to be a 1-year depot level fix, whereas everything else was kind of like a quick upgrade going to 7 and so forth. But it was going to be a complete like rework of the jet as far as wiring and all that. Can you talk about any of that?
I can't talk to the software side of that, but I can talk to the aircraft side of that in this environment. And so the aircraft side we're going through what's called a SLEP, a Service Life Extension Program. So we're basically bringing the aircraft in, and we are taking it down to its skeleton. Like, a lot of times there's no skin left on the aircraft. It literally looks like a skeleton up there. And we're doing a lot of structural work. And on some cases, you can walk out there, and they've actually separated kind of right behind the cockpit, and they've separated it from the rest of the airframe to do some of the bulkhead work, to make that jet last, another 20 years. Amazing.
The first, before we go, because the SLEP part, was the Viper originally a 4,000-hour jet?
I think it was 4, moved to 8, right? And now we're going to go to like 16
first
or 20 or something.
First life extension from 4 to 8 or 9. And now doing it again to take this all the way out to 2045, 2050, or whatever they're saying the Viper is going to be around. So that is, again, that was the kind of rumor or the murmurings I heard. I was at Shaw last October, and they were doing swap outs for radars, and that looked like that was an in-house swap out, pretty easy. But kind of the next big upgrade was going to be a long visit to the depot to get a lot of work done on each jet.
Yeah, so they're doing the Service Life Extension Program, and then there's also the different mods that are going to go on. So it'll come back to the fleet with the ability to bolt on more and different things over the years. So they've kind of designed it for what do we think is coming up, so we don't have to bring it back again to do some sort of structural upgrade to take whatever we're going to hang on it next. So we'll do some of the radar work at depot, but that radar work can also be done out at the field. So if they have capacity out there, they can take that on and do that work, and so we can go faster. I'll come back real quick to the Boneyard, AMARG as we call it, Aircraft Maintenance to Regeneration Group, down at Tucson. So a lot of people are like, "Oh, that's where we park all our airplanes that are never going to fly again," and that's like not at all what happened. Sure, a bunch of them aren't going to fly again, but a whole bunch of them are going to get regenerated. They may just not be regenerated for our Air Force. And so we're pulling jets out of there all the time of any different flavors, Vipers, C-130s, other aircraft. We're regenerating them and selling them to other countries. Or in a lot of times, in the case of the Viper, we're regenerating and turning into QF-16. Makes me sad. But my buddy Rhino, he explained to me, like I think you know Rhino, he's like, hey, it's going to die a glorious death and it's going to help us be better. So it makes me sleep better. But,
yeah.
You know,
why couldn't it be a Strike Eagle? Yeah.
That's right. That's what I said. I know the first Eagle pilots that got to shoot down an F-16 was probably like, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you know, they love that.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's just some of the work they do. But they also can do depot maintenance level work down there. And so if there's some workload that we can't quite handle at Hill, we'll send it down there. So they're going to take over some of the less intrusive things that we do. So post-block repairs, they might do the PISR, and that's escaping me right now what that is. It's another kind of a structural upgrade, not quite as extensive as LEP. So that's additional capacity that we have. And then the program office also stood up another location at Greenville, South Carolina. So kind of not too far from where you are. You could probably drive up the road and see the work that they're doing, some depot work to take on some of that workload. So got a couple of different locations doing that work. It's going to come to us for about 400 days. So it's not a trivial amount of time, but what we're trying to do every day is how can we make that faster? And so General Bell, he was out at the ALC, he is always going, all right, it used to be we were, sending this many days, now we're getting down to this, now we're getting down to this. So as we learn, that's part of our culture. We call it art of the possible. What can we learn today that's going to make us better tomorrow? And then how fast can we implement that in so we can just keep going faster and faster and faster? Because every day it jets with us is hurting our unit out there, right? So if we have 50 F-16s sitting at Hill, that's 2 fighter squadrons with airplanes that aren't trained. So how do we get those out of here faster? And that's kind of the mentality that we're taking through the center right now. The speed, right? Quality, right? Want to get you a good jet back, but I want to get back to you pretty fast, relatively speaking.
Backing up in time again to the maintenance group commander role, what was your biggest challenge in that role? What kept you up at night? What was the biggest hurdle?
At Kunsan, the thing that I thought about the most was the ability to train people who hadn't been on the Viper before, to make sure we had that time, because that pace over there is just fast. It's just, it is what it is over there. You got a mission that you're thinking about all the time. And so nobody wants to take the time to train, but you have to. And so that was what kind of drove me there. And then the same thing of, how come this jet's been down so long? Like, that repair shouldn't take that long. Why is it taking that long? And that comes back to training. These guys aren't trained. Okay, let's go train so we can make these repairs faster. So always driven by, how do I get the jet back to fully mission capable status so we can get it on the flight line, so you guys can go off and do the things that you need to do. At Shaw, I had a different problem because they had struggled for so long with this turnover that they had, and they just kind of had thrown their hands up like, we're just going to not be good. It's just Shaw, the term at the time was Shawshank, right? Even Shawshank. And you're like, that's terrible. Like, that's not where we need to be in life. And so I got together with the squadron commanders and I'm like, all right, what do we do? Guys, we got to do something different, because like having a 60% MC rate. So every day when I first got there, we had an entire fighter squadrons with a jet that were sitting on the ground that could not fly. I'm like, guys, this is unacceptable. How are they going to get training to go off to what they're going to do? Because, at Shaw, one squadron gone. One squadron just came back, and you got another squadron getting ready to go. And they probably need to go do a red flag and whatever else. And so we don't have time to have a whole freaking fire squadron just sitting on the ground. And so the mindset change there was the first challenge to come up with, that, like, guys, we're not defeated. Like, let's figure this out. So let's shift from the negative to the positive. And then I told Hack, I was like, Hack, in about, I'd been there for a few months. I'm like, Hack, next summer, before you leave, we're going to launch the fleet. He's like, not going to happen. I'm like, watch. Like, we've been training. We're getting better. We changed a lot of the things that we did. We went away from 12-hour shifts. I told him you cannot work a 12-hour shift, and we're not doing permanent weekend duty. Because a lot of times what happens is if you know you're going to have a weekend duty crew come in, then you won't kind of finish up the work because you know someone's going to catch it on the end. It's just normal human behavior. So, like, take that away from them, right? We're not turning stuff over from day shift to swing shift that we don't have to. Because I don't want swing shift. So you can't work 12-hour days. Your maximum amount of time is 10 hours. And so by forcing them to do that, you actually made them work during the day. And there wasn't a lot of, smoking and joking around. It was like, no kidding, we're here at work. We're doing our thing. And then working with ACC to get our manning to come up a little bit and our skill levels to come up a little bit. And I had an amazing chief at the time who was a genius at doing that. Chief McClure, he is awesome, and we still chat all the time. And he's got a long beard and a ponytail and everything. But
doing it right,
smartest F-16 maintainer on this planet, bar none. And so just kind of changing the way we did that, and no kidding, on right before change of command from Hack, we had 61 available F-16s, and they launched 59 of them at the same time. So I don't know if you've ever seen that video,
That's
but
stout.
Watching all three fighter squadrons, almost 20 jets each, come over the airfield, it was awesome. I mean, that was the coolest thing I ever saw. And my wife still talks about it. She's not like super airplane person, but she's like, that was the most amazing thing I've ever seen. But had to work with ops to make that happen. We had to change a lot of the processes that we did to make that happen. And oh, by the way, the other rule was we're not working the weekend to fix it. So make sure you got good jet sets in the air. And so we didn't even work weekend duty, and we flew a normal day the next Monday. So you can do a lot of things down there. You just have to have the right mindset, and you got to be willing to try new stuff. I call it weird and different. Try it. Hey, try it. If it doesn't work, okay. But if you don't try something new, you're going to keep getting what you got. Right. And I went and talked to the ops guys a lot over in the vault, and I tell them, here's what we're doing. Here's why we're doing it. Here's where I need your help. So again, back to that communication of, I need you to know what we're doing. I need to know what you're doing, what's important to you. And if you don't have that, then you're not going to be able to do things like that.
It's an interesting mind shift switch there. I'm thinking what, leading up to that time period over the course of a couple years, come out of sequestration, get all the flying hours. And once you get the flying hours, you can't turn around and say, oh no, we can't fly them. But Shaw, with about a 15,000 hour flying hour program a year. Does that sound somewhere?
I wish I could remember. I don't know. I can't remember.
I might be making
There's a lot. Three fighter squadrons worth.
It was 3 fighter squadrons, but then as you alluded to, one squadron's always gone, and those flying hours coming out of a different pool of money. So then 2 fighter squadrons to fly the hours of 3, and then throw in Operation Noble Eagle on top of that too. It's like it's just nonstop, and you can't whittle away at all these hours. I do remember, like, Maestro, one of the first things I feel like he did maybe in the first month or so, like he turned around and said, we're not flying all these hours, which was a huge reprieve. Like at some point, like it's really great to have a lot of flying, but I think there was a month that I had 25 sorties almost, which is awesome. But also, like, you're not really getting a whole lot of, you're not really fully mission planning, briefing, and debriefing. You're kind of just going from one to the next to the next. Again, it's land of first world problems, right? But there's a fine line of making sure that you get the quality training, the debrief, the learning out of the sortie, also the planning going into it, versus just like boom, 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 boom. And then not to mention, like, it's breaking everyone's backs to generate that many sorties all the time. So yeah, interesting. But if you follow it up, it's weekend duty, turn it over. You can see how this thing kind of snowballs, and just like everyone's beaten down. It's the next guy, he'll pick it up. Like, I can see how this perpetuates and then gets down to the road, or gets down to the point where we were in the 2018-ish time frame or so, where it wasn't looking great.
No, it wasn't. And Maestro, amazing wing commander. I had a blast working with him because he was so open-minded about stuff. And he basically said, hey, I am not the expert in what you do. Go figure it out. and tell me what you're doing. Right. And he told the same thing, I think, to Hack. He's like, hey, I don't need to be a group commander. You're the group commander. You go figure it out. And, oh, by the way, you need to work with Hall. You need to work with the MSG. And you need to work with the med group. And so we used to have these meetings all the time, the 5 or 6 of us. Okay, what are we doing? Who can help who? How do we make this better? And so working all those groups together, we were able to go from, I think we were about 60% MC when we all first got there to, a few months before we left, we were, and I don't know that everybody was CMR either on the ops side. And so I know the ops is doing a lot with their scheduling and who flew when to kind of help out with that. And you guys had some IP trouble. And so that was something we needed to know so we could make sure we had the right jet for the IP, and so again, communication. But right about the time, so a few months before we all kind of leapt out, we were sitting at 80% MC, and I think we were like RAP plus 15, percent, and everybody was CMR, and nobody had looked back except for the guys who had gone to SOFs or took a bunch of leave or something. So,
random.
I mean, if you can get all 4 of those groups working together to try new and different things, and then have fun while you're doing it, and those crazy videos that he used to make. That just made everybody smile, right? And it just kind of took the edge off some of the bad days when you see the wing commander out there doing something silly. Yeah. Like pretending to get hit on the head with a golf ball. That was one of my favorite ones. Yeah, like he was awesome. Yeah.
I think he had a knack for making videos.
He did. He was a broadcast journalism major, so
yeah, makes sense.
Right up his alley.
Oh, no, I was very fortunate in that time, and it made that assignment phenomenal for me, from the guys on the team working, because that was a piece too, like for me, getting a full appreciation of the maintenance aspect of it, but then seeing, we made the mission happen, and the circle for us was very small and very immediate of seeing direct actions having direct impact. A little tougher sometimes when you don't see the entire picture. Demo team's a little bit different. But the leadership around that time frame was letting people do what they needed to get done. Not always the case.
It's not. And we're fortunate after Hack, and I love that guy. He's unapologetically a fighter pilot. He said it in his change of command speech. And then he tried to take credit for launching the fleet, and I'm like, no. That was Maintenance idea. But then we got Trip Raymond after that, and he was equally awesome to work with, and again, helped solve some other problems that we couldn't get after before. So got that team working together, man. It's amazing, but you can tell instantly when you don't have that. When those group commanders aren't getting along, it affects both sides of that equation, the ops maintenance equation, and it probably bleeds down to the NSG and the medical group as well. So that's like super key leadership lesson I learned, both at Kingston and at Shaw.
A lot of structure changes going on in the Air Force, one of which, I'm not sure how this one's going to be executed or where it is in the process, but it sounds like group commanders, at least ops group commander, is going away, and that's going to get pulled up to the wing. Correct me if I'm wrong with that, but then any impact on the maintenance side of the house, how that one's shaping out?
Yeah, so we're going to go kind of backwards a little bit in terms of our structure, not like in a negative way, but back in time. So it used to be, when my dad was in, you had the wing commander and you had a DCO, deputy commander for op, your deputy commander for maintenance, deputy commander for resources, and you had your medical. I don't remember if it was a group or exactly what they called that. We're going to go back to that similar concept. So you're going to have a deputy commander for op, you're going to have a deputy commander for sustainment in what's called the deployable combat wing, right? And so we'll take the easiest one to talk through is Mountain Home, because it's one of the few bases that's really kind of one base, one box. It's just kind of its thing, right? You could kind of say that to Kunsan, but the PACAS's not really doing that right now. So we'll use Mountain Home as the example. So that wing commander is also the installation commander, runs all the stuff, right? Just like Maestro did, but he doesn't have a nav commander. But what we're going to do is at Mountain Home, we're going to take the 366 fighter wing and we're going to split it. So you're going to have basically ops and maintenance on one side in this deployable combat wing structure that will be called the 366 fighter wing, I'm sure. And then the rest of it is going to be called the airbase wing, much like we have at some of our larger bases right now. And so you're going to have those deployable folks are going to focus on deploying. That's what they're going to do. They're going to have a small contingent of security forces, all the things that you would need if you're going to plop down to a new base. So they can work and train together every day and take that thing on the road and, deal out and jumpy. Meanwhile, you're going to have the airbase wing that's going to be there to take care of the wing and whatever's left over. Because that wing, that deployable combat wing, is probably only going to deploy out with one of its flying squadrons. The other one's going to stay home because it's probably assigned to a different deployable combat wing. And so that wing may be somewhere else. And so it needs some Strike Eagles, it needs some tankers, it needs a bomber. And so that wing will pick up and take those components from wherever it goes and somewhere else. That's kind of how that's going to work. And we can talk some more about that because that was a lot right quick. But that's the overall concept of how we're trying to do it.
Guess where I'm going with that. I've heard of the composite wings back in the day, and actually Mountain Home specifically. Buddy who was a part of that, and he said one of the big challenges with it was doing this blended wing. And I think the Mountain Home was a blend of buffs, Strike Eagles, and tankers, which created it created a whole slew of problems on the maintenance side of the house because you had to have sustainment and expertise for all of those at that wing. But this sounds like it's a little bit different.
It is. It is trying to get that concept without bringing all those assets to one place. And so that one you're talking about back in the late 80s, early 90s when we were doing that out there, that could have worked if we stayed that size of our Air Force at, 500,000 plus people. But when we reduced the Air Force down to 300,000 people, you don't have enough to put one of each kind of airplane there. Because as we talked about before, if you have two different engines, you have to have a huge engine facility because you got to have space to work on two different kinds of engines because they're not designed the same way. And so if you got 5 different kinds of engines, forget about it. So if we can create that concept without actually moving aircraft, great. And so now, if you have, again, I'm going to make stuff up here, so nothing's been decided. You have this 366 fighter wing, and it has one fighter squadron, which we're also going to call a mission force generation element. So we're going to throw a whole bunch of new acronyms in here just to see if we can make it more confusing.
We need more acronyms.
That's right. So you're going to take that fighter squadron and that wing, right? And then this wing is going to say, hey, Fairchild, to do my mission, I need a tanker squadron. And hey, Dias, I need a mission force generation element of B1s, which is going to be 3 or 4 of those, And then, hey, ISR tanker, I'm going to need 1 or 2 E3 to pick up and go to do this thing. And so before that, they were going to go exercise. They're going to do a red flag. They're going to go out and do, a Code North or something. I don't know. They'll pick it out. We'll do some training beforehand. So when it's time to go, even though they're picking up from different locations, they have trained together before, right? As a unit with that command structure, they know how to communicate up and down the chain, and they're going to pick up and plop down wherever it is that they go. That's the theory on what's going to happen.
Okay.
So a lot of work to do yet still, figuring out all that, and there's some manpower issues, right? Because you're moving people back and forth. But that's kind of the theory of what we're trying to do.
Gotcha. Well, as we wrap up here, I'd like to ask you something that keeps you awake at night, or what's one of the biggest hurdles you face today or that you think about in your job at the Sustainment Center to make sure that it's a success?
Probably the biggest thing I think about is resourcing. We'll never have enough money to resource all of the things that we need. Like throughout my career, it's always been, I think the reason we have the tension that we do sometimes between our ops and maintenance is ops is typically funded to about 100%. Right, so you're going to have your fire squadrons are typically 100% manned, sometimes more, right, which is actually not a good thing for you guys.
Right.
But at the maintenance level, we're going to be manned around 80%, and so we're also going to be funded to about 80%, but then expected to produce 100% of what you need, right? So that's where I think this disparity comes in. So for me, any resourcing that we can break away to close that gap is what we need to do, and that's kind of what I look at as I look around the center and go, all right, resourcing, which jets need the most love right now? We have to pick winners and losers. right? If there's a jet that's going away, I am not going to spend the resources on that. I'm going to move those resources over here to this airplane. And so those are the things that we were, and they are very hard decisions because you get Congress involved, you get, the internal communities and the Air Force involved, and they, people don't like it. But that's the things that we have to do. So that's probably the hardest and thing that I don't know if it keeps me up at night, but I think about a lot during the day for sure. So yeah, I think that's resourcing is what I would probably hang my hat on.
You don't like doing more with less? That's a great buzz phrase, whatever.
It's so not.
Well, sir, I appreciate you taking the time to sit down and chat today. Great catching up, great learning a little bit more about the maintenance world and some of just the hurdles in everyday life that it takes to make it all happen.
Hey, I appreciate you having me on. I love talking about what it is we do, and I love trying to change the mindset of our maintainers into that mission mindset, and I love trying to educate on the ops side that we are mission oriented, just like you are. We just achieve our mission a different way.
Well, thanks for what you do. Thanks to all the maintainers out there. That's, really the backbone of making it all happen. So if you're a pilot, make sure you think of maintainer today for sure.
Great messages. Amazing Americans out there and young men and women doing work that is absolutely amazing. So yeah, a high five to all of them.